Let's break down the hidden structure behind one of the biggest expenses in pretty much everyone's life, rent.
Why rent keeps increasing feels normal.
But it is rarely accidental.
And the structure behind it changes everything.
You know, most explanations for why rent is so high, they usually start with a pretty simple and logical idea that we can all grasp: supply and demand. It's the common story, and it's definitely worth understanding why that is. At its core, the problem is that housing has just gotten incredibly expensive. Since the pandemic, rent has jumped over 30% across the country. And look, that isn't just an abstract number on a chart. It means that today, half of all renters are what's called housing cost burdened. Basically, they're spending more than a third of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. And the main reason people point to for this is a huge supply shortage. Right now, the United States is short about 2 million homes. That's the gap between what we need and what we actually have.
Now, this isn't some new problem that just popped up. Its roots go back more than a decade. After the Great Recession hit in 2008, home construction just fell off a cliff. And the thing is, it never really recovered to the levels we saw before the crash. So we've basically been underbuilding for years and years. And on top of that long-term shortage, you've got other pressures piling on. Construction costs, we're talking materials and labor, have shot up over 20% in just the last 5 years. Interest rates have climbed like crazy, making it way more expensive for developers to even get new projects off the ground. And then, in a lot of places, you have all these restrictive zoning and land use rules that just add more time and more money to any new building. All of these are very real factors.
So while everything we just talked about is true, it still doesn't quite explain why rent hikes feel so constant, so widespread. It turns out there's another layer to this story. And this brings us to what you could call a hidden mechanism. It's a system, a specific piece of technology that is fundamentally changing how rent prices get set in the first place.
It's called algorithmic pricing. What it is software sold to landlords that does something interesting. It doesn't just look at a landlord's own building, it actually collects sensitive, non-public data from their direct competitors. Things like what they're charging, how many units are empty, and then uses all that inside info to recommend new prices every single day. The biggest company in this game is called RealPage. And to give you an idea of its impact, the U.S. Department of Justice said in a lawsuit that the company has, and I'm quoting here, built a business out of frustrating the natural forces of competition. So here's the nuts and bolts of how it works. First, the software pulls in all that private data from so-called competitors every single day. Second, a shared algorithm chews on all that data and spits out a price designed to, quote, maximize revenue. And then third, and this is key, if a local property manager wants to charge less than what the software recommends, they often have to write up a formal justification that gets sent up to a supervisor. You can see how that creates some serious pressure to just accept the higher price. And the intention here is no secret. In its own training materials, RealPage explained that its software helps curb a landlord's natural instinct to lower prices when the market gets weak or apartments are sitting empty. The whole point is to enforce pricing discipline. So the effect of all this is a major shift away from competition and toward coordination. Instead of different landlords lowering their prices to attract tenants from each other, they're all essentially outsourcing their pricing decisions to the same central computer program. They start moving together, not against each other. And the system is built to nudge all of their prices upward in sync. Now this pricing mechanism, it doesn't just exist in a bubble. It actually interacts with other big forces in the housing market. And that creates this really powerful reinforcing loop. One of the biggest forces at play right now is something called mortgage lock-in. It's basically a situation where millions of homeowners have a mortgage rate that is way, way lower than the rates they could get today. And that creates this huge financial reason not to move. People have started calling those super low mortgage rates from 2020 and 2021 golden handcuffs. Homeowners are essentially trapped. If they move, they'd have to trade in, say, a 3% mortgage for a 6 or 7% one. That's a massive monthly payment shock. So they stay put, and that starves the for-sale market of homes that we badly need. And this kicks off a really vicious cycle. Mortgage lock-in means fewer homes are for sale. That forces people who want to buy a house to just keep renting for longer. This extra demand in the rental market gives those pricing algorithms even more power to push rents higher. And then, of course, those higher rents make it even harder for people to save up a down payment, trapping them in that rental cycle. So when we zoom out and look at the big picture, you can start to see how all these different pieces combine to create a totally new and much higher baseline for rent. These are structural forces now. It's also really important to remember that landlords have their own rising costs to deal with. Property insurance is getting way more expensive, especially in places with climate risks. Property taxes are going up as home values rise, and just general inflation has made maintenance and repairs cost a lot more. These are real costs, and they inevitably get passed on to tenants, which helps create a higher price floor for everybody.
So when you put it all together, you've got the deep-seated supply shortage, you've got the price coordination from the algorithms, the extra demand on rentals from mortgage lock-in, and the landlord's own rising costs. What you get is this powerful, interlocking structure. It's a system where the default setting, the path of least resistance, is for rent to just keep going up.
So the effect is not random, it is structural.
And now you see it a little more clearly.